So I guess we've sort of alluded to a bit of this, how founders like comedians, athletes, musicians, it's the same thing. And I did stand up for a little while, and you see the same types of characters that you do as entrepreneurs. Someone said before, it's people who are out of the box or maybe outcasts from society. They don't tend to fit in. They don't tend to make great employees, for example. But the inspiration is, people need to support each other. People need to help each other out, and it's the long game. It's really the long game, and you've got to love and enjoy that journey, because there will be the ups and downs. And for a lot of people, they don't make it in the long run in comedy and acting and in music as entrepreneurs. They don't make it, and that's why they've genuinely got to love the journey. So I think that's a really important piece for me. I've written here why some founders need to be told no, and it's really interesting because this is something that I struggle with as an investor, and I would love if anyone else here is, advising startups, advising businesses, or investing in businesses. It's one of the most difficult things to know how to deal with. It's the equivalent of in comedy telling someone they're not funny, right? Someone may not be funny, but do they need to hear? I guess with comedy you get immediate feedback from your crowd, so you can figure it out yourself and realize that you need to work on your act. You don't necessarily get an entrepreneurialism, and it's always a difficult thing. Sometimes I'll speak to a founder and they say they want to sell their business for £20 million, but they want to raise VC and they want to do this and they want to do that, and it's not going to happen. If you're not trying to build a billion or potentially multi-billion pound business, a VC is wasting its time talking to you because it's all about the return. And sometimes it's like telling someone their baby's ugly, right? No one wants to do it. And probably in that case, you don't need to do it. But how do people feel? Is it your job as an advisor? Is it your job as an investor to tell a founder, no, this is not going to work because of X, Y, Z, and giving them that reality check? How do other people deal with this?
Surely there's many a person that's been told no that's gone on to make millions from it, right?
Absolutely. I think it's an important part of the process, but sometimes if it's just, sometimes it's just not going to work because there's fatal flaws, or like a founder, for example, they're not willing to raise money because they don't want to give away their equity or something. So when it's like a fatal flaw, something like that, something where it's just obvious like that, that's just not going to work. I agree there's subjective elements, but when you've got something which just isn't going to work, do you tell them how do other people really deal with that?
Right, I have a simple rule when I get involved with helping entrepreneurs out, whether it's as an angel investor or whether it's as a coach or support or whatever. My key characteristic in terms of being able to attack the point you just made is the person receptive to that sort of stuff? Have they got a degree of I don't know what I don't know in them? And if they have, and I can see that, I think it's an important characteristic in any entrepreneur is to not be too arrogant about what their views and feelings are about what they're building and going to do. And I think if you can find entrepreneurs that have that component in them, that they recognize that they can learn things and they can take on board those types of feedback points, I think it's an important characteristic of any good entrepreneur. I've seen so many that have got some to Caroline's point, very attitudinal towards what they believe they're going to build, and it doesn't matter what they think, they're going to push through, and that's fine. And I think that's an important characteristic. You have to have that resilience, no doubt about that. But there's that resilience with a degree of respect for people who've been there, seen it, done it, got a T-shirt around them. And I think if you can spot that in an entrepreneur, that's a really important characteristic. It doesn't always look like that on the surface, I find, but if that component is in them as part of their DNA, I think it's easier to do what you just said, which is to tell them that maybe their baby is a bit ugly and might need some work doing.
That's really, really interesting, Nigel. And how do you deal with the ones who aren't receptive? And no matter what you tell them, do you still tell them the truth, or do you just send them on their way?
I think you do, and I think you do have to still tell them that. But it's back to, in the communication, do they listen and understand and absorb that? I think you can quickly spot whether they've taken that on board or they haven't. And that's fine, look, everyone's got a point to make. And you either listen to it or you don't. but I think some of them will still go on and be successful. But equally, there'll be an awful lot of them that don't. And I think it's a simple Pareto rule. Some of those people that are over arrogant about what they're building and going to do are the ones that are in the 20% and don't make it.
Really interesting.
Although this leads back to emotional intelligence again, as we have at ChairX that conversation so many times.
Absolutely, Caroline.
Because it's about, I mean, any founder that's told no should be asking the questions, why don't you think that's going to work? Or what do we need to do to get this right? Which is much more emotionally intelligent than just pushing ahead with the idea without understanding what the bumps are going to be along the road. So yeah, fantastic. Any more questions for Roy before we move on to, very intriguingly, my dad? So very interested to hear about that. Yeah, sure. If there's no other questions, I mean, just talking about, it goes back to what we were saying before. I think entrepreneurialism is a brutal journey in many ways, and it can be brutal for the people around you as well. And I think I saw that with my dad, who was, raised in the East End of Glasgow, was a taxi driver, a long distance truck driver, bus driver, really, really doing anything to make ends meet. And eventually, he was, I think, always an entrepreneur at heart. Eventually started to make a bit of money, and, until he finally made money when I was 19 and he was, I think 61. And that's when he finally had some security, which is interesting, although it wasn't, a lot, but his life had been building up to that point. And I think that's what's given me the insight to say, if you're successful at this point, you're successful at that point, the whole idea of the DNA of an entrepreneur is it's a lifelong journey. It's just so important to go and understand that there's going to be the ups and downs, not just within a business, but from one business to another. So I think that's been a huge inspiration to me, and just seeing him plug away and realizing, it didn't mean he was always the most present, didn't mean he was always the most, attentive, but, did whatever he could to go and make business work and to keep food on the table as someone who didn't consider themselves employable. So that's, really, really interesting lesson for me to learn. And then the last one on Pipe. So Harry was the founder of Pipe, who was an investor in my first business, and a real advisor to me. So he's someone, again, who didn't come from anything, grew up in the same sort of area in London, didn't have anything at all, moved out to the US, and really is now living the American dream in terms of Pipe is, I think was the fastest ever fintech to hit a 2 billion valuation. They've raised 350 million in capital over the last couple of years, came from absolutely nothing. Now, absolutely leading on that side of things, total, thought leader within the world of technology and entrepreneurialism. And for me, that's just an amazing thing to look at and to learn from, because it just goes to show, you don't need to come from VC, you don't need to come from banking, you don't need to come from anywhere. You just need to have that belief, and you need to have the realization that you can shape the reality around you. If you can think it, it's possible. So yeah, that's my final piece. Excellent, thank you, Ray. It's been a really excellent journey through. I'm so glad that we asked you, Roy, and thank you so much for investing the time, because there's some great content, some great takeaways in there. So thank you very much for that, and hope to see you again soon. And if you're not already a member of ChairX, do consider it. We're at chairx.network, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks so much, everyone. Cheers. Cheers. Nice. Okay, cool. Hey.